By the end of the 19th century, the world was rapidly changing. Old empires struggled to maintain control, while new powers emerged with growing confidence. Among them was the United States of America, a nation that had healed from civil war, expanded across a continent, and now stood on the edge of global influence. In 1898, a brief but transformative conflict would mark America's arrival on the world stage. This conflict became known as the Spanish-American War. For more than 4 centuries, Spain had been one of the world's greatest empires. But by the late 1800s, its power had faded. Once vast territories in the Americas had been lost, leaving Spain with only a handful of overseas possessions, including Cuba, Puerto Rico, the Philippines, and Guam. These remaining colonies were restless, and nowhere was resistance stronger than in Cuba. Cuba was only 90 miles from the coast of Florida, yet it remained under Spanish rule. For decades, Cuban revolutionaries had fought for independence. By the 1890s, the Cuban War of Independence erupted once again, marked by brutal fighting and harsh Spanish countermeasures. Spanish General Valeriano Weyler attempted to crush the rebellion by forcing civilians into concentration camps where thousands died from disease and starvation. Reports of suffering shocked the world. In the United States, sympathy for the Cuban people grew rapidly. American businesses had strong economic interests in Cuba, particularly in sugar production. More importantly, newspapers played a powerful role in shaping public opinion. Sensationalist journalism, later known as yellow journalism, dominated major newspapers, run by publishers such as William Randolph Hearst and Joseph Pulitzer. Graphic headlines exaggerated Spanish atrocities and portrayed Spain as cruel and barbaric. Though some of these stories were exaggerated or unverified, they inflamed public outrage. Calls for American intervention grew louder. Many Americans believed it was the nation's moral duty to help liberate Cuba. Others saw the situation as an opportunity to expand American influence beyond its borders. President William McKinley initially resisted war. He hoped diplomacy could resolve the crisis. Spain, under international pressure, offered limited reforms in Cuba, but events soon spiraled beyond control. On February 15, 1898, a massive explosion tore through the American battleship, USS Maine, while it was anchored in Havana Harbor. The blast killed more than 260 American sailors. Though the cause was unknown, newspapers immediately blamed Spain. The rallying cry, "Remember the Maine," echoed across the nation. Public pressure became overwhelming. Despite the lack of conclusive evidence, the American public demanded action. In April 1898, the United States declared war on Spain. The Spanish-American War had begun. The war itself was short, lasting only a few months, but its consequences would be far-reaching. The United States fought Spain in 2 major theaters, the Caribbean and the Pacific. In the Pacific, American forces targeted the Spanish Philippines. On May 1, 1898, Commodore George Dewey led the U.S. Navy into Manila Bay. In a stunning display of naval power, American ships destroyed the Spanish fleet with minimal losses. The victory was swift and decisive, shocking European observers and demonstrating America's growing military capability. In the Caribbean, the focus was on Cuba and Puerto Rico. American troops, including volunteer regiments, landed in Cuba in June 1898. Among them was the famous Rough Riders, a volunteer cavalry unit led by Theodore Roosevelt, who would later become president. The fighting in Cuba revealed both the strengths and weaknesses of the U.S. military. American soldiers showed courage and determination, but they were poorly supplied and unprepared for tropical conditions. Disease, including malaria and yellow fever, killed far more soldiers than combat. One of the most famous engagements of the war was the Battle of San Juan Hill. Though militarily limited, it became a symbol of American bravery. Roosevelt's charge up the hill was widely publicized, enhancing his national reputation. Meanwhile, the U.S. Navy trapped the Spanish Caribbean fleet in Santiago Harbor. When the Spanish ships attempted to escape, they were destroyed in a matter of hours. With Spanish naval power shattered, the outcome of the war was no longer in doubt. Puerto Rico fell quickly to American forces with little resistance. Spanish troops were demoralized, poorly equipped, and vastly outmatched. By August 1898, Spain sought peace. The Treaty of Paris was signed later that year, officially ending the war. Under the treaty, Spain recognized Cuban independence and ceded Puerto Rico and Guam to the United States. Spain also sold the Philippines to the U.S. for $20 million. Though the war lasted less than 4 months, its impact was enormous. The United States emerged as a global power with overseas territories for the first time. America was no longer focused solely on continental expansion. It had become an imperial nation. However, victory brought controversy. Many Americans supported expansion, believing it was the nation's destiny to spread democracy and civilization. Others strongly opposed imperialism, arguing that ruling foreign lands contradicted American values of self-government. The Anti-Imperialist League, which included figures like Mark Twain, warned that empire would corrupt the republic. Nowhere was this debate more intense than in the Philippines. Filipino revolutionaries, led by Emilio Aguinaldo, had fought Spain for independence and initially welcomed American assistance. But when it became clear that the United States intended to rule the islands, tensions exploded into the Philippine-American War. This conflict was far bloodier and longer than the Spanish-American War, exposing the darker side of American expansion. Cuba, though officially independent, remained under heavy American influence. The Platt Amendment allowed the United States to intervene in Cuban affairs and established a permanent U.S. naval base at Guantanamo Bay. Cuban independence was real but limited. The Spanish-American War also marked a turning point in American identity. The nation now possessed a powerful navy, overseas bases, and international responsibilities. It had entered the ranks of world powers. For Spain, the defeat was devastating. The loss of its remaining empire triggered national soul-searching and marked the end of Spain's role as a global superpower. The war reshaped journalism, military policy, and foreign relations. It propelled Theodore Roosevelt into national prominence, influenced future American interventions, and set the stage for the United States' role in the 20th century. Though brief, the Spanish-American War changed history. It transformed the United States from a regional power into a global force, altered the lives of millions in Cuba, Puerto Rico, and the Philippines, and raised questions about empire, freedom, and responsibility that continue to echo today. It was a war fueled by emotion media and ambition, but its consequences would last far longer than the conflict itself.